We are in Luke chapter 6, and it's kind of carrying on again. We got to put this in perspective real quick. Again, Luke is this physician who's recording this for people who aren't necessarily Jews, but he's introducing them to the reality, to the work, to the ministry of what the Lord Jesus Christ did in his time on earth here. And he has been sharing from a historical perspective all these things that have been going on to help Theophilus, a Gentile man, come to faith in Jesus Christ. And then this letter's been preserved for us for the same reason, so that we have a revelation of Jesus, so that we can see what's been revealed about the work of Jesus in our life. And so, some things have been going on here. Jesus has begun his ministry, and we've had, the opposition of the Pharisees and Jewish leadership, and we've had him beginning to do miracles and heal people and forgive people of their sins and demonstrate that he has the power and the authority to do those things into the masses of people that are coming to hear him speak. And again, he's demonstrating again his power, his authority, but he's also, in doing this, demonstrating his love, right? He's meeting the needs of people, whether spiritual or physical, in many of these cases. He is forgiving them of their sins and meeting the greatest need of their life, but he is also at the same time now beginning to heal people and meeting their physical needs where they're at, where they're living, right? And so some of these people, are experiencing, like last week, a man who had a withered up hand. We don't know what that meant other than this hand didn't function. I have a slightly withered hand. I broke 3 metacarpal in this finger, and I had all kinds of rods and pins and screws in here for a long time. And so for a while, this hand was considerably withered, right? Now it's considerably withered with some arthritis, right? But it's not, it's never was what it was before, but again, through God's grace, they didn't amputate my arm, so I'm glad to have it the way it is. So, again, this man had gone through some portion of his life. We don't know if it was from birth or if it was something that happened to him in some accident or, some disease or whatever, but Jesus gives him back his hand, and it was an instantaneous change in his life to demonstrate, again, his power, his authority, his lordship, right? As not just the Savior of the world, but as the King of the world, as the Creator of the world. And so it's demonstrating, Jesus is demonstrating the fullness of God in all of his glory in these actions that he's doing. And he is going around all these different places and doing like and similar things. And so multitudes of people are hearing about Jesus. Multitudes of people are experiencing Jesus. Multitudes of people are also rejecting Jesus and being jealous of Jesus and undermining Jesus. And so, you see that all the way through today. There are people who are glorifying God with their lives. There are people that are accepting God in their lives. There's people that are putting God in the proper place in their lives. And then there are people that are snubbing their nose at God, rebelling against God, rejecting God. And so nothing has changed, right? From that day to this, where lost people are in need of the work that only Jesus can do. And so that brings us back to what we were talking about last week. That's why our job one and the church's job is get people to Jesus as fast as we can, because the only thing that will change that condition, whether physical or spiritual or mental, in a person who is lost and undone's life, is the power of God, right? And so we talked about God's word being, in particular Luke and the Gospels, being a God revealing himself to the people that he was around, and revealing himself still today through his word and his power and his love. And so these guys, again, are coming to Jesus. He's been doing a lot of things here. Let's see. Let me pick this up. It says our key doctrine here is God the Son is our key doctrine. Christ is the one mediator, fully God, fully man, and in whose person is effected the reconciliation between God and man. And so again, he is demonstrating, yes, they all know that you're Jesus from Nazareth, but he's demonstrating, yes, Jesus of Nazareth is God in the flesh, right? And so he's demonstrating that, and demonstrating the reality of access to God is through him as the mediator. And so it gives us our first thoughts here. It says this: most of us have been given a second chance. Man, I've been given more than second chances. I've been given 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 chances. But when we make a big mistake, there was a person in our lives willing to see past that mistake and help us to move forward. For many of us, that's our parents. For many of us, that's our spouse. For many of us, that might be a good friend or somebody that we know. But, again, if you love somebody, you're willing to help them move forward even though they make mistakes. And even though we make mistakes, we're always thankful that people are there to help us move forward. That individual's offer of forgiveness, assistance in moving forward, and the opportunity to prove ourselves causes us to appreciate and love that person in a deeper way, right? So, strangely enough, two of my closest friends, one from high school, one from college days, the one from high school called. He was down visiting his dad in El Paso, and he called me. It's like, hey, I'm here. Can you get together with me? So I went to El Paso, and I had breakfast with him, spent half the day reminiscing, talking about, what you do when you see somebody that you haven't seen for a long time. And we keep in touch, but, once or twice a year we see each other, kind of a deal. And he was the guy who was with me when I fell off the mountain. He's the guy that wanted to climb the mountain on a Sunday after church when I didn't feel like it and I didn't want to go, and he kind of coerced me into going. And he has felt really guilty about that ever since. He feels like he's responsible for me falling and all I had to go through. But, and so almost every time I see him, I have to set the record straight and say, it has nothing to do with you. God had a purpose in that in my life, and I wouldn't trade it. I would not wish it on anybody, but I would not trade that experience in my life because God used it to mold me into what I am today, right? I mean, it has given me the ability to understand how much God is in control of my life, how great His mercy is in my life, how great His power is in my life. It has given me the ability to endure things that most people won't endure. I have an amazingly high tolerance for pain, which you could not believe. But God blessed me with that because it has been a tool in my life to overcome many an obstacle and to press down and go forward when a lot of others won't. And so, my dad and I were, it's weird because my dad and I were talking about that situation, when he and my mom got news that their son, who just is about to turn 19, may not live. They were in Ohio, and what the doctor said, and what the doctor said after the fact. He said, you are beyond comprehension that you have recovered the way you have recovered. And remember, we talked about it with your son, and they just could not believe. They were going to amputate my arm and my leg, and then. He said, if I can save your arm and your leg, you'll never run again. You'll walk with a limp, and you'll get back 70% range of motion in your ankle and your leg and in your arm. Guess what? I run, not so far anymore. I have 97% range of motion in my ankle, and I have 94 range motion in my arm. You can't hardly tell that I've had anything happen to me, right? And most people never know. But here's the deal. Jesus was doing miraculous things like that in the lives of people. Live, right? Right then and there. He was doing things that are so fantastic, and people were seeing these transformations, these withered hands coming back, and he's about to kick it up a few notches. And in previous verses to this he did, and he's beginning to raise people from the dead. Whoa, right? You guys, I know all you guys remember this. See, this is really good because Joe always comes up with these real modern illustrations for his service, and I don't have to keep up with modern times because I don't really like them. So you'll think you can relate to this. Remember when Elvis was the rage? Man, when I was a kid, Elvis was truly king. Everybody and their mother was Elvis crazy. it was just a crazy thing to see people follow that guy. You were one? Oh, yeah. And, girls, the Beatles too before that. But, girls swooning and people screaming. And, he's taking off sweaty rags and giving to people, and they're taking them. Think about that during COVID. You think that would fly very far today? No. But, again, the celebrity, right? The excitement, the emotion, the adrenaline, the charge around being. So I think I told you I met Mike Rowe. I really like Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe. And you know what? It was a charge for me to meet Mike Rowe because he's a pretty nice guy in person too. You know, I've met some celebrities that are not nice in person. They are not nice at all. But Mike Rowe is one of those guys who, what you see in TV and in his podcasting, is pretty much the way he is all day long. Very consistent guy. And so, you know, you get a little bit of a charge of that. Well, Jesus is becoming somewhat of a celebrity in his community. I have a friend here in town who's a nurse, and she is now a character on Tour of Duty, which is probably something most of you won't be participating in, but it's an online game where people go in and do combat. And so she is now a character on this big, you know, international game. And so here's this friend from Las Cruces that, you know, suddenly now people all over the world are seeing in this game. And she's got this character that you can buy and you can fight as this character, and it's her. And so it's kind of weird because, you know, she's very excited, of course, because it's a level of celebrity and people are sending her, you know, pictures of them fighting in her persona in this game. And so she's drilling them out on Instagram and Facebook, you know, because she's excited. So it's this steady stream of her in a cartoon-type character in this video game. And so she's experiencing this celebrity. And so she sent me a little message and said, you know, isn't this crazy? I said, yeah. I said, what would be real crazy is if some guy starts playing this game and recognizes, oh my goodness, that was my nurse. She goes, oh my goodness, I hope not. I said, well, you can't have celebrity and you know, not expect for someone to recognize you in your hometown. And so, you know, she's going to have to start dealing with, especially younger patients, that she's going to, you know, end up getting recognized. So she's like, well, I want to have the fun, but not the pain of that. I'm like, well, good luck with that. Right? But Jesus is now getting where he can't go anywhere. Crowds are beginning to throng around him. They're beginning to oppress him a little bit, right? The house is full, but they got to tear the roof off to let the guy down in that we studied a couple weeks ago. He's at the seashore, you know, and the crowd's pressing in on him and almost driving him out in the water. They want to hear what he has to say and see what he's going to do. And so he steps into the boat and they row out from shore so he can get a little space to be able to communicate and not be overrun. And now when he's walking down the street, people are reaching out and they're grabbing a hold of him and touching his garment to try and get healed. And that's happening. And people are trying to press into him and get close to him. But not everybody that's coming to see Jesus is coming because they love Jesus, right? A lot of people come to Jesus because they want something, and especially a lot of lost people, they come to Jesus in times that are critical in their life. They're not religious at all most of the time. They're out living for themselves, doing their own thing, and then some tragedy happens in life, and what happens? They start praying, and they start asking everybody else to pray, right? So I think I've mentioned before, my dad has a couple of friends who had what they call foxhole conversions in Vietnam, right? Lord, if you get me out of this, I'll do anything you want me to do. And both of them are preachers today that are friends of my dad's. But that's that kind of mentality. So it tells us that a lot of people are coming to get to leverage out of Jesus what they can get out of Jesus. But it's not because they have a relationship or love him or are looking for a relationship with him. They're looking to use him, right? They're looking to get either a charge from his celebrity, a charge from watching him do a miracle, or experience a miracle, or experience something, you know, just like when Elvis gave out the hankies with the sweat on it and the girl would faint, right? And so, again, this story that's coming up here deals with somebody who is around Jesus because he's become popular, even though they don't like him. You know, that's another thing that happens too, is, you know, if you become popular or you become wealthy, you have people that may not necessarily really like you, but they want to be close to you because they think they might be able to leverage that relationship in some way. And so we have that happening here as we begin our story, and we'll get into that in a minute. So Jesus is doing these miracles, and he is doing these miracles for the same reason that he came to the earth to begin with, right? He didn't come here, again, to be a celebrity, right? He came to do the will of his Father. The will of his Father was the cross, right? And he did that out of love for his Father, and he did that out of love for us, right? And so the miracles that Jesus is doing, again, is not to create celebrity for himself, not to create a position. He's trying to give all glory to the Father. He's not trying to rob God of his glory. He's trying to do the will of him that sent him. And so Jesus is, again, doing these miracles not for his own fame, but for God's honor and glory, and out of the same motivation that he came to go to the cross, love. He's doing these works in these people's lives because he has compassion on them, because he loves them, and because he cares for them. So the fortune part of it and the fame part of it was not the goal, it was love. So these miracles not only demonstrated Jesus' power, but they revealed his compassion and his love. And so, again, there's a lot of things going on. Before we get to this, he's recently raised Jairus' daughter from the dead. He's recently had the woman reach out who had the issue of blood and touched the hem of his garment and been healed. And so, again, his notoriety is reaching a fever pitch of big time Elvis kind of level, and again, so now we come to our text, and a Pharisee. Now, what do we know about the Pharisees and Jesus to date? They don't like him. They've been out to get him. They're jealous of him. They're trying to undermine him because they feel like they're being shortchanged because, after all, they're the religious leaders in the community, and they're the ones that have supposedly this relationship with God as the spiritual leadership, and they want to have the crowds adore them for their closeness and walk with God, and they don't want somebody else interjecting and doing a better job than them of sharing God and of pointing people to God and of bringing people to God. And so they're undermining him, and they're demeaning him, and they're always out to get him, and they've been trying to trick him. They've been trying to manipulate him so that they can press charges against him for saying something that's in their minds blasphemous. And, they're trying to get him to break the Sabbath so they can say, oh, he's not really a spiritual leader. Look, he broke the Sabbath. And they're just always trying to do something to him. But this guy, Simon, he wants to, you've heard that enemy, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer kind of a deal. So he invites Jesus to dinner, right? So Jesus, they've been condemning Jesus because he's been eating with publicans and sinners, but then they invite him to dinner. So you see how that's two-sided kind of mindset there? And so Jesus is there, and this particular situation comes that we're about to study. In verse 40, he says, Jesus replied to him, Simon, I have something to say to you. And he said, say it, teacher. And so again, obviously Jesus is a person of prestige and of notoriety at this point. He's in his house. He can't shut Jesus up, right? So he's got to hear what Jesus has to say. But Jesus is going to basically call Simon out because Simon is not having Jesus there because he wants to have what Jesus has to offer. He just wants to be able to leverage Jesus. I had Jesus at my house. You know what I mean? And so he's leveraging Jesus. And there's someone else that's going to come here, uninvited, that's going to respond to Jesus in a totally different way. She didn't come to leverage Jesus. She came to love Jesus. Right? And we'll look at that. So Simon, though, is here. And so let's put this into perspective. We're not sitting around a table like we do here. They're lounging around a table, right? And so they would be laying, and they would be around the food, and it would be communal dining, and your head is at this person's feet, and all the way around like that, right? And so this place that Jesus is living in, anybody want to go with Mike to Israel, is a dusty place, dusty place. And back then they wore sandals and not long pants, right? And so their feet and their legs from just walking down the street would become very dirty, right? And so, here's where we're at. Jesus is laying down here eating, and he says, Simon, I got something to tell you. And Simon says, tell me, teacher. And, do they really think Jesus is a teacher? They don't want Jesus to be a teacher. So is this a sarcastic, oh, all right, tell me, teacher, you got something to tell me? Tell me. I don't know. But based on how the Pharisees have been treating him, I'm thinking that he's being a little sarcastic here in this reply. And then he goes on in verse 41 to say, And Jesus tells him this story. He says, a creditor who had 2 debtors, one owed him 500 denarii. So the other one owed him 50. And so, that's a lot of money on both counts. That's a couple of months' wages on one count on the 50 side, and that's a lot of money that most wealthy people would struggle to scrape together on the high end on the average person in this day and age. So both debts are significant. When we think of these 2 debts, a lot of times we think, well, 150, 50 is a little small debt. No, they were both significant debts. But one was definitely much greater than the other one, right? And so, again, for someone to forgive a debt that, would take you in this day and age a couple of months to earn at a standard day's wage is a lot of money to most people, right? I mean, if I had to give somebody 2 months of my income, that for me would be very significant, right? So to forgive that kind of a debt would be a significant thing on my part to be able to do that. And then the bigger debt, that's just almost like beyond comprehension that someone would be able to forgive that kind of a debt and that volume of a debt in that day and age. I mean, that's just mind-blowing. And so he's using some numbers here to make you realize the depth and the difference between the first number and the second number, right? And he's going to do that. He's going to use that to illustrate the difference of what he's talking about here in a minute. He says, since they could not pay it back, he graciously forgave them both. And so, again, this guy is doing something significant on both cases. So which of them will love him more, he asks. That's the question. And, this is a question that he's asking Simon, but it's a question we should ask ourselves. What is our level of love for Jesus is what we're saying here, right? What is the level of love? Are we recognizing the depth and the level of to which he has gone to forgive us? See, a lot of us think we're pretty good, so we're in the 50 range, right? But the reality is we're not. That's the reality. We'd like to be in the 50 range, but even that is significant. See, that's the point. Even if we were in the 50 range of sins, that's significant that a holy God that we have sinned against and our vile, corrupt nature has opposed and our rebellion has opposed for God to give his son to die for us. But he would do it. He's gracious. He's merciful. But the reality is we're in the 500 plus category, right? Anybody made it through the day without sinning today? I'm lucky if I can get 30 or 40 minutes, right? Man, especially today in this age, you're bombarded with things that make you angry. You're bombarded with things that make you short with people. You're bombarded with things that depress you and make you doubt God and his power and his control in your life. You're bombarded with sexual things. You're bombarded with whatever your weakness is. Satan goes about as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour, right? He is, again, trying to trip us up. He is trying to ensnare and entangle us. And our nature plays into that because we are fallen. And so God, in his mercy, has demonstrated an amazing grace to us, right? That's why we sing Amazing Grace. God, in his mercy, has demonstrated something that is so generous and so mind-boggling. How would a guy forgive this giant debt? Well, how would a God forgive this giant debt against him, right? And so that's part of what we need to say. Which will love him more? Simon answered, I suppose the one who forgave more. Jesus says, you have judged correctly, he told him. So the reality is, the perspective we should have is that we have great love for God because of his grace that he has bestowed in our life. That's the proper perspective that we should have. But it's not the perspective that Simon had, right? Simon thinks, I'm a pretty good guy. I'm a 50 guy. After all, I'm a Pharisee. I'm a religious leader. I'm pretty good, right? I don't really need much saving here. There's not much that needs fixing in my life, instead of looking at the reality of who he was and what he really was, a sinner who was condemned, who had no hope. without Jesus. So the perspective was wrong for Simon. And again, in society, we have so many people that go through with that perspective. I'm a pretty good guy. I had a guy tell me one time, after I witnessed to him, he said, you know what? I'll take that up with the man upstairs when I get there. Too late. Too late. And that is the mindset of many people. I'm pretty good. I gave to this charity. I did these good things. I treated my wife right. I took care of my kids. I got them a college education. I did this. I did that. My mother's father was a mason. And, so their whole deal was doing good works. They could go out and be wild and wicked all week long, and then they would pile in a whole bunch of good things to charities and to good works and religious things and have verses in some of their ceremonies and stuff like that, but live like the devil the rest of the time. But it was a balancing to them. They were balancing the scale, and they'll be okay, right? I'm pretty good. I'm 50-50. And so we go through the life with the mindset of Simon. And it's the wrong mindset. And Jesus is trying to make that point to Simon here. He's trying to give Simon a heads up about where he's at and in the reality of what he needs, right? And so he's trying to help Simon come to an understanding, and the next person in the picture is going to help that. And so now there's this woman. There's a woman who comes, and she's not a part of the dinner guest. She's not on the list. She's not anybody popular. She's not a celebrity like Jesus. She's not a religious leader like Simon. She's actually kind of an outcast because she's a certain kind of woman. She's in need and recognize the reality that she's down 500 denarii in her morality to God, and that she has railed against God, and that she has an obligation to God, a debt to God, that she cannot pay, that she cannot fix. But she knows who can, right? And she comes in a totally different approach than Simon, who's the religious leader who thinks he's pretty hot stuff. I got Jesus to come to my house. She comes crying. She comes broken. She comes giving everything that she can, that she has, that is precious to Jesus. She comes treating Jesus the way that somebody who loves Jesus would treat Jesus. So Jesus is here, and he's eating, and this woman is suddenly on the scene. And of course, Simon has probably invited all of his peers, his Pharisaical peers that are all there trying to, again, probably get a scope on this Jesus, how they can trick him up and how they can, because that's what they've been doing all along, right? And they're watching, and they've already been judgmental many times of Jesus eating with the publicans and the sinners, and Jesus' disciples eating the grain in the field on the Sabbath and working. You shouldn't be rubbing any grain in your hand and working, and taking God's word out of context. And he's already demonstrated last week, like we talked about, that he's the Lord of the Sabbath. The Lord of the Sabbath is the whole point of the Sabbath, right? And so here's these guys, and now you can imagine some woman barging in. It's kind of like when they knock the roof out and let the guy down in through the roof. There's this constant barrage of people. It's kind of like, sneaking in without a ticket to see Elvis, right? Or going down front and trying to touch him, and then security comes in and grabs a hold of him and pulls him back. It's kind of like that. This woman comes in, and they're probably thinking, what are we going to do with this woman? This woman's here. Where'd she come from? How'd she get in? All these things are probably going on. There's probably a little excitement. And Jesus turns to this woman, and he said to Simon, do you see this woman? Of course Simon sees the woman, right? It's at his dinner table with his special guest Jesus, right? And so this woman is out of nowhere, and she's doing some strange things that you just don't see people do. It's like really out of the ordinary. It's like, the streakers at the football game, running out on the field. Of course you see the streaker on the football field. Everybody saw the streaker, right? And so there's this kind of, this guy's been kind of facetious with Jesus. Okay, teacher, tell me, what do you got to say? Jesus says, do you see this woman? So he kind of gives it back, right? He says, do you see this woman? I entered into your house and you gave me no water for my feet. So again, tradition was you have a guest who's just walked to your house in sandals, no long pants to cover his legs. His legs and his feet are dusty and dirty, and now you're going to recline and eat together, head to feet, head to feet, head to feet. The custom was you gave your guests some water to wash the dust off, to clean up before you, out of honor for them, out of courtesy, out of respect, and if you cared about them, out of love, right? Simon didn't do that. He's there to show off Jesus to his friends, right? He don't care about Jesus' well-being. He doesn't love or respect Jesus. He's just using Jesus. And so he says, I entered into your house and you gave me no water for my feet. But she, with her tears, so this is a woman who is broken over the reality of her position, owing God a great debt, recognizing that reality, not having no resources to rectify or correct that situation, but acknowledging it in the way that she was broken. All right? And so with her tears, she has washed my feet and wiped them with her hair. So not only did she wash his feet, Simon didn't wash Jesus' feet and give him a towel to dry his feet off. So she did what should have been done, because she came in and saw Jesus and recognized that his feet were dirty. And that's not how Jesus should be treated. This is Jesus. This is the Son of God. This is the man who has the power to forgive sins and to heal, right? And why would you treat him like that? And so she does for him, because she can see his feet are dirty when she comes into the room. And she goes right to demonstrate to Jesus the reality of her compassion and commitment to him and her love for him. By the way, she focuses immediately on giving Jesus the love and respect that should be due Jesus. Approaching Jesus the way that Jesus should be approached by any sinner. And so she's drying, she's wiped off. She must have been a real crier to wash a big pair of dirty feet and legs, right? But she's basically getting the dirt off with her hair. I mean, that's the reality of it. And so, I mean, she is defiling herself, right? She is removing the pollutants from Jesus and taking them on herself out of her love and respect for Jesus. I mean, this is a bizarre thing that's taking place, right? This is not normal behavior in society. And so these Pharisees are probably thinking, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. This woman is embarrassing me at my dinner, and I have all my friends here to see Jesus. But now Jesus has just kind of pointed out the reality of the situation. Simon is being called on the carpet for his approach to Jesus, which is incorrect, right? And he says, you gave me no kiss. So again, back to culture. If you respect and honor somebody, you're going to invite them to your house. What do? We hug, we shake hands. We demonstrate, again, this person that I'm inviting into my home and I'm going to feed a meal. I have a level of reverence, respect, and many times love for this person. So we treat them a certain way, right? We greet them a certain way. When I go to my dad's house or to a good friend's house, to Judy's house when I went to Pagosa Springs, we hugged. We all hugged because we were happy to see each other, because there was a relationship, because there was affection, right? And so that's the natural deal. There was no affection from Simon for Jesus, no cultural recognition of, I'm glad you're here, welcome to my home. None of that. He's just like, hey, come sit over here by me. So everybody, he's not saying it, but this is what he's thinking. So everybody can see how important I am because I have Jesus with me. Jesus the healer, right? Jesus the famous guy from Nazareth. He's here in my house sitting next to me, right? That's the mindset that Simon is broadcasting here. Now, you laugh a little, but it's true, right? You can see it when you think about it. You may not, when we read this, I didn't really think about this until this lesson. This guy is leveraging Jesus. That's what he's doing. And Jesus is calling him out. He says, you gave me no kiss. She hasn't stopped kissing my feet since I came in. So not only is she showing proper reverence to Jesus, she's going above and beyond, because she's not giving him a ritual, cultural kiss on each cheek. She is now washed these feet and now begins to caress and kiss his feet out of adoration and love for Jesus. She is like, I understand who you are, and I understand who I am. And I am putting myself where I belong, and I am putting you where you belong in the scheme of my life. Right? And that is another thing that we struggle with in our culture. We want to give to Jesus just enough to get by sometimes. Just enough to say we know him. Just enough to call on him for a favor if we're in a tight bind. Just enough to leverage him to some degree. Love him just enough to not feel guilty because, it's like, you give a gift to somebody at Christmas because they give a gift to you, but you don't really put a lot of thought in it. You just don't want to be the guy who doesn't give a gift back and look bad, right? And so we have this very shallow relationship with Jesus that we are very minimally acknowledging the reality of who he is and the reality of who we are. And many people go through life calling themselves a Christian, living just like that. Not in a real relationship that is positionally correct with Jesus where he belongs, and our life ordered where it belongs in response to the reality of him. And it is sad because we will never experience what this woman is about to experience when we go through life like Simon. Simon came in contact with Jesus and he left unchanged. But that's not what happened to the woman who came in contact with Jesus and did it right? So let's go on with our story. You didn't anoint my head with olive oil, but she has anointed my feet with perfume. So here's the last part of this positioning Jesus. Olive oil, again, you come off the street, you're dusty. Belle came in with beautiful hair this evening. I came in earlier today out of the wind, and it looked like my head had exploded. And when I go out sometimes on searches and wear hats, and then I come out and my hat, So people would travel and they're dusty, they're dirty, they wash their feet, they greet them, and then they would give them some oil to, again, moisturize their skin. They've been out in the hot sun, they didn't have all the things that we have today for that. Their hair is all wild and crazy, and so they, again, shape their hair back down to get themselves in place to get ready to eat. And so you're basically letting your guests go freshen up. This is what we would do, right? And so you're giving them, again, the tools, the water and the towel and washing their feet and the greeting, and you're giving them the ability to, they've traveled to get to your location. They couldn't take an Uber. They had to walk, or they had to get a camel, or they had to, something, and it was whatever it wasn't as convenient as it is today. And so again, they're showing honor to this guest and allowing them to freshen up and giving them the resources to do that. Simon didn't do that because, again, he had no care or concern for Jesus. But this woman not only cared about Jesus, she gave something very precious so that she might meet that need in Jesus' life, that she might, treat Jesus the way that Jesus ought to be treated. She brings a very expensive ointment, perfume, not just regular old olive oil that you can get anywhere, but something that was costly, that probably cost her a tremendous amount of her livelihood, and probably was something that she had put away maybe for a special occasion like a burial or a wedding, or to be sold in a time of need like a savings. And it was something that was, again, that had great value to her. And she's using it not just in a way that would be a big flourish like at a wedding or something, but she's putting it on the feet of a man who's going to go back out into the dusty street in a little while. And it's all going to be gone. But she cares so much for Jesus that it's worth it. She loves him so much that it's worth that to do that for Jesus. Right? Because she recognizes the value of what Jesus can do for her. Right? And the love that, remember, Jesus has not been healing for fame and for fortune. He's been healing out of compassion and love. And she has probably seen Jesus healing people and forgiving people of their sins out of his compassion and love. You can't help but see someone doing something good with compassion and take note of it, right? And so she sees this compassion of Jesus. And so she returns and reciprocates with compassion for him. We love Jesus. Why? Because he first loved us, right? And so we're getting to the end of the story. Jesus goes on to tell Simon, therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven. So here's a woman who's, she's breaking all kinds of cultural taboos. She's coming in where a bunch of men are that she doesn't know, that are not her family members. She's probably, from what we can gather, been a woman of the world in the past, we'll put it that way. She's got a lot of baggage. She's got a lot of things going on, but she sees the reality that her problem can be handled by a compassionate, loving God through the work of his son, Jesus, right? And so he says, I tell you, her sins, her many sins. So Jesus doesn't give us a number, but he does quantify the reality that this woman has many sins. But you know what? Simon sitting next to him also had many sins. Again, we're back to the fact that we like to think we're the 50, but we're really the 500. And so it's obvious, though, that this woman is the 500. Some of us 50s or wannabe 50s are good at hiding the other 450. This woman wasn't, right? It was an obvious that she had great sin in her life, many sins. And so he says, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven. That's why she loved much. She had experienced Jesus. We don't know if she'd experienced Jesus earlier and he had already told her sins forgiven, but he's going to tell her again here. Or her faith placed in Jesus, the deal was sealed, because that's how we get forgiveness of sins, right? We trust Jesus. We place our faith in him to forgive us of our sins because he said that he would, right? And so anyways, this woman has acted on whatever she's experienced of Jesus to this point. We don't have all the backstory. But whether she saw him heal somebody else, forgive somebody else, heard about it, we don't know. But the reality is she responded to the revealed Jesus correctly. She responded to the reality of Jesus correctly. And that's why she loved much, he says. But the one who is forgiven little loves little. When you don't think you need anything, when you think you've got it all wrapped up, when you think you have all the power, the money, the health, the whatever that you have, you don't think you need Jesus. Man, my life's going good. My family's great. My future's bright. My bank account is fat. I don't need much Jesus, right? I'm pretty good. And so they have that mindset of devaluing Jesus. That's what people do. They devalue him because they're not clearly seeing the reality of where they're at, right? They're looking at the temporary. They're looking at the physical. Remember we talked about a couple weeks ago, we need to pick our head up and look at the eternal. When we look at ourselves through the light and lens of eternity, we can see pretty darn quick that we need Jesus. All right? And so, again, Jesus is very clearly demonstrating to those around him the two mindsets of people who come to Jesus. One correct, one incorrect. One has an impact on their life that will impact their eternity for the better, and one has an impact on their life that will impact their eternity for the negative. So forgiveness of sins frees us to love God. That's the other thing. We love God because he first loved us. When God opens our hearts and minds and illumines our hearts and minds to the truth, what does that do? It frees us, again, to see these truths that we're talking about today and correct our life in relationship to the reality of Jesus and the reality of who we are, right? We shouldn't live like a person who doesn't have much regard for Jesus. We shouldn't go through life like we have it all together and we don't need him. We should go through life that we recognize the reality that without Jesus we are lost and undone, and there is no hope, there is no future, there is no good, there is no gain. And so the last verse here says this, then he said to her, your sins are forgiven. Those who were at the table with him began to say among themselves, who is this man who even forgives sins? So again, Even though Jesus made a very clear demonstration of this truth and this reality of two mindsets, everybody at the table who didn't come to Jesus for the right reasons and who had no love or affection for Jesus missed the point of the whole deal, and they immediately start saying, who does he think he is? He's healing people. Now he's forgiving sins. Who does he think he is? God, kind of a mindset, right? Well, yeah. If you're thinking clearly, you would understand the only God that could do what Jesus was doing is God, right? If you're being honest with the situation, if you're paying attention to what's been revealed about Jesus in your life, there is no other conclusion you can come to. But if you want to go through life ignoring that reality, dismissing that reality, then you're living in your little delusional life. But here's the reality that we've talked about before. There's going to come a time when every knee will bow and every tongue will confess the reality of who Jesus is, right? There's no getting around that. It's just about, do we do it where we gain the benefit of this relationship with him, or we don't? And do we live it in our life where we gain that benefit of our relationship with him, or we don't? This little phrase goes through my brain since I was little. Life on earth will soon be past, and only what's done for Christ will last. Right? And it weighs on me because I've done a lot of things for myself, and I've done a lot of things for others when I should be focusing on doing things for Jesus. I should be wiping his feet, placing my tears there, my affections there, my heart there, my resources there, my oil there, my perfume, where it belongs. We said last week, do you not know that you're not your own? You've been bought with a price, therefore glorify God with your body. We need to recognize the reality of who we are in this relationship and how we should respond to Jesus. And so Jesus goes on and he tells this woman, this is a great day for this woman because she got it right. This is a great day for this woman because her life and her eternity is changed forever going forward. The weight of her sin, the penalty of her sin, the brokenness of her relationship between her and God has been remedied. It is all taken care of. Jesus said on the cross, it is finished, and it was done, right? And so she walks away, and he said to the woman, your faith has saved you, go in peace. That is the great thing about God's grace. We don't have to do anything but accept the reality of Jesus. And we do that by placing our faith in him. Isn't that an amazing thing? It's amazing. It's amazing grace. Any questions or comments before we close? Nope. Wow, you guys are quiet today. All right. Lord, we thank you for your blessings. We thank you for this marvelous story, Lord, that shares the reality of who you are, the reality of our need, the reality of our opportunity and our relationship with you, to bring you honor and glory for all your marvelous grace and mercy in our life. I pray, Father, you'd help us to be diligent to live our life that demonstrates that fact and that truth. We ask this in your name. Amen.